to what should be the extent of freedom of speech. In order to debate the issue out in an academic manner, Keele has brought a panel of representatives, as you can see either side of me, from different religious and non-religious backgrounds together to articulate their respective views and take questions on the issue directly from the audience. Before introducing the panel of representatives, I would first like to thank the Christian Union for their support in bringing this event together, and I would like to thank our panel representatives again for taking time out of their busy schedules to articulate their viewpoints and come here tonight and hopefully answer some very difficult questions. Please feel free to put your hand up and comment, and we'll hopefully make it a very lively debate. I must ask everybody to remember we are here to share and discuss ideas, and you are almost guaranteed to dislike somebody's opinion. So please refrain from spontaneous explosions displaying your disdain against somebody's opinion. Yeah. And I ask you all to, remain polite and civil. I'm sure you all will. Before we begin, I'll introduce the panelists, and then the speakers will have a maximum of 7 minutes to answer our starting question, and then we'll open the floor up to questions, and it will begin. Okay, so first I shall introduce Jenny Bartle here. Do we will wave? She found her way into the humanist movement at university while she was studying physics at Bristol. She joined the Atheist, Agnostic and Secular Society there, and it wasn't long before she was president. The following year, she progressed to the president of the National Federation of Atheist, Humanist and Secular Student Societies, and is currently their head of education. And she has a lot to say on this topic of freedom of speech, as you may have seen on YouTube and other places. Here we have, to my left, we have Rabbi Ahram Cohen, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Ahram.
The H is...
Aaron, not the
H is silent.
Okay, Ahram. Okay. He was born and bred in England, as was his father before him. His mother was born in Poland and came here as a child, and his grandparents came to this country from Eastern Europe approximately 100 years ago. The rabbi is a family man. His children all have families of their own, and being part of the Orthodox Jewish community, he and his family endeavor to live their lives entirely in accordance with the Jewish religion. He trained as a rabbi but was active for many years in commerce. In more recent years, he became more involved in ecclesiastical, I can't say this word, I'm sorry. Ecclesiastical duties within the Jewish community, and was particularly involved in educating youth. He now spends a lot of his time spreading the important but little known message of Zionism, and he is one of many Orthodox Jews who completely sympathize with the cause of the Palestinians. A little bit about him. To my right, we have Abdullah Al-Andalusi. He is an international speaker on Islam and Muslim affairs. He defends Islamic orthodoxy from a rational basis and follows Islamic opinions within the main Sunni schools of thought. Abdullah was a former Christian of Portuguese descent, and he embraced Islam after a period of study since he was 10 years old. He has spoken in community centres, universities, colleges, and has numerous appearances on various TV programs on TV channels, including ITV, BBC Arabic, Press TV, Islam Channel, and Iqra TV. And he has also engaged in a number of debates with atheists, secularists, and Christians on a variety of topics, from theology to political philosophy. In 2009, he co-founded the Public Discussion Forum, which is the Muslim Debate Initiative, a forum that promotes open dialogue and critical debate between thinkers, academics, and public speakers of all backgrounds. And hopefully you'll be able to find this debate on their YouTube channel, correct?
Yep.
Hopefully. And he debates issues ranging, for example, on the BMP with integration and multiculturalism, to the existence of God, to debates titles things such as "Is Hell Just?" and amongst others. To my immediate left, we have Maruf. With a non-sectarian approach, Maruf has established a working record with a number of organisations across the board on the common good, beginning with his Islamic Society at university. He helped establish the Islamic Student Societies for Midlands and founded the grassroots dawah organisation Al-Hikmah, which is the host to the UK's largest annual Islamic convention entitled United Muslims Convention. He is also the executive director for the Islamic College of England. Over the years, Maruf, alongside his team, have been involved in hosting some of the most prominent figures on the Muslim scene, ranging from Dr. Zakir Naik to the Imam of Masjid Al-Aqsa. On an informal basis, he studies various Islamic sciences in the English language for over 8 years. His teachers include Sheikh Sharul Hussein Al-Azhari, Sheikh Al-Riya from Jordan, Sidi Aslam, Qari Ismail, Sheikh Hassan Ali, and others. You may know of some of these names. Maruf has just begun his voyage on his path of knowledge and intends to grow in his understanding over the years to come. We have our very own Lola, I'm going to get this wrong again, Olukoban. Yes. Although she doesn't subscribe to any particular Christian sect, she supposes she'd be described as a Protestant, if anything. Lola is a finalist at Keele, studying actuarial science. I don't know what that is either. Lola has been on the committee for Jesus Jam, a Christian fellowship, since her second year, and she hosts a radio show on Cube, aptly named Jesus Jam Radio. Its aim is to present Christian views plainly to everyone. She is also part of the Keele mentoring scheme. She lived in Nigeria for 12 years and plays an active role in the technical team in her home church back in London, where her family lives. It's a little biography. Last but not least, we have Matthew Gordon on the far left. He has been heavily involved in the development of mentoring in the UK. He was the youngest member of a small specialist team responsible for training over 7,000 adults across 30 UK universities to become academic mentors. The mentors went on to support 25,000 school children in England and Wales. Since then, he has been involved in mentor development, working around the UK, teaching the skills needed to bring the best out of young people and professionals. Through this work, he has had the opportunity to travel to Brazil and South Africa. More recently, he was invited to Princeton University in the US to engage with a range of theological scholars to debate the black minority experience for an Obama era. In addition to mentoring work, he has also worked as a management consultant specializing in governments for both the statutory and third sectors, specifically within the Muslim and Christian communities. In 2012, he set up a Christian-based debate forum in an attempt to nurture the young Christian voice. And currently, he lives in Wolverhampton with his wife and 4 children. So, if you remember anything of what I said, it should be a good debate tonight. We've got lots of good panelists with a range of backgrounds. So each panelist will have 7 minutes to answer our first question, which they haven't been told yet, but they should probably have guessed what it was. And this is the first question, and we'll start on the far right, if that's okay.
Yeah, why not?
Okay, so this is the question. As part of a civilized society, should videos such as the innocence of Muslims and the Danish and French cartoons, which all aim to mock the Prophet Muhammad or any other prophet, be allowed under the guise of freedom of speech?
I like that word guys.
1 second.
I suppose the word guys makes it easier for me to continue. I did think about what is freedom of speech? That is expression of what you feel or like the opinions you have. And I feel like you should be allowed to do that. But when you have influence on other people, and as human beings, I might feel like I don't have influence, but if I'm tweeting stuff, if I'm writing stuff up, if it's going in a newspaper, then I need to back up my opinion with fact. And if what I'm saying does not line up with the facts, then it's a baseless opinion, and I have no business sharing that. And so if my opinion is mocking religious, what is the word? Religious
Figures,
thank you. Then if it doesn't line up with what the belief says, what business have I got sharing that with the rest of the world? I'm pretty much just brainwashing everyone to think how I think, when the facts clearly state something else.
Okay.
It is guys under the heading of freedom of speech, but in the Bible it talks about lacing your words with grace. It talks about how things are permissible but not beneficial. I am allowed to put up this cartoon and video, but how beneficial is it to the rest of the world? What is the aim of me doing this? What would it cause? What are the repercussions of what I'm doing? So under the guise of freedom of speech, I don't think things that will cause such turmoil and mockery to somebody else's belief should be allowed to be done, to be honest.
So you think they should be banned if someone makes these kind of cartoons? You don't think they should be allowed?
Banned is a strong word. When you ban stuff, it just goes wrong. Like, I feel like people should be educated on the subject. That way, when you're educated, it's not a law. If you want to do these things, you don't want to be offensive to other people because you've thought about what it is, and based on the facts, that's not correct. So out of logic, as opposed to being banned, you would not put things up like that.
Some communities and some people within our communities, they make these cartoons simply as they want to express that they have freedom of speech. They might not necessarily agree with what they're creating, but they do it because they believe freedom of speech is a fundamental part of this society. So people, for example, like these, do you think they should be banned from producing these type of cartoons?
Banned, that's a strong
Okay, well, what word would you use then?
I think education is key because, like, again, I keep referring back to the Bible, but in the Bible it says, my people perish for lack of knowledge. If you have no knowledge, then spreading the word you have is not helping anyone. Again, the Bible says, zeal without knowledge is useless. You need to back up what you're saying with knowledge. And even freedom of speech, you are allowed to express what you say, but then there are limitations to freedom of speech. There's things like slander, there's things like libel, like definitely. So if what you're doing falls under those categories, then legally you're not bound by freedom of speech. So I think you should think about what you're doing. What benefit is it to do what you're doing? Once you think about it, what's the motive behind what you're doing? Is it to cause an uproar? Is it to cause like discomfort? What is the aim of that? We should learn to live together and tolerate each other. There is no point in kicking up a fuss just because you can. That's abuse of power, and we shouldn't do that.
Okay. Do any panelists have any comments on yours?
So one of your key points is that it would be nice, wouldn't it, if everyone would just not be nasty to everyone else, but sometimes you need to say something that is very offensive to a group of people in order to defend another group of people, for example. I guess you can't just paint it as a black and white picture. I think the most important thing, I guess, I don't know what your name is.
Sean. Sorry, okay. I'm Sean, everyone.
Okay. Sean brought this up in one of his questions to you, which was, some people say freedom of speech for the sake of freedom of speech, and I think to an extent we need to be able to defend freedom of speech for its own sake. It's unfortunate that some people choose to do that in a way which is quite hateful, but the law is there. Again, there are limitations on freedom of speech. If you are inciting hatred against a group of people, if you're inciting people to act, that's very different to saying this group of people. Well, actually, in the case of depicting Muhammad, it's not this group of people, it's this figure who a group of people respect, which isn't actually directly attacking the group of people, it's attacking their beliefs. So you're not actually attacking a person, which is an important distinction. So rather than victimizing people, you're challenging an idea. And ideas are abstract things which within freedom of speech within a free society and within the law are not currently protected, and I feel it should probably stay that way. I don't know if you want to come back.
Can you just repeat the question so I just fully clear?
The question, as part of a civilized society, should videos such as the innocence of Muslims and the Danish and French cartoons, which all aim to mock the Prophet Muhammad, and anything like them, which aims to mock a prophet or religious figure, be allowed under the guise of freedom of speech?
I suppose the first question I would ask is, who controls this civilized society that you're referring to?
Okay, well, in our case it would be this society, but in general, a society should they be allowed in the...
Well, if that civilized society that you're referring to is civil society, then I have no real control of that. And so, how they govern the country, the continent, the area, is completely up to them. It's not my call. So, in answer to your question, yes, if that is civil law and people are allowed to express themselves, have freedom of expression, which would be freedom of speech, then yes. Now, in terms of Article 10(2) of the ECHR, it's freedom of expression isn't an absolute right, it's a qualified right, so there are conditions associated with that. So if you're John Terry and you think you've got freedom of expression, you might get in trouble because it's not an absolute right that you can say what you want. Then there are conditions attached to that. So whoever wants to insult another should be aware that you can say what you want, but there may be consequences. But if we are saying, should they have a right to say what they want, then yes, of course.
Well, the freedom of speech, what an interesting euphemism. I would say that freedom of speech doesn't exist. We all know this. There's limits. In fact, freedom doesn't exist. You know, there's all kinds of laws, including the natural law of the universe, which restricts us as human beings. So everything, there's no such thing as freedom. But it's a nice euphemism to use to make ourselves feel a little bit better, or maybe civilizationally superior, perhaps saying that we're special, maybe we have more rights. But really what has just changed with the adoption of freedom is just the taboos have changed. So taboos were no longer rooted in the values of Christianity, but are now rooted in the values of secular humanism or humanism of some kind. Now, when dealing with the issue of the film, The Innocence of Muslims, and I would disagree, the title of the film is not The Innocence of Prophet Muhammad, or the life of Prophet Muhammad, or what happened during the life of Prophet Muhammad. It's the innocence of Muslims. So if I want to do a video about Moses and I showed him being a bloodthirsty barbarian or warlord, and then I called it The Innocence of Jews, could I say I'm not attacking a group of people? No, I'm just historical critique of Moses. That's all. But why would I call it Innocence of Jews? And then I talk about Moses very specifically, just specifically him, and demonizing him and saying very bad things. Of course, there were people who did cartoons and did documentaries and wrote texts about a minority living in the West, and we noticed in the 1930s and 40s. They exercised their freedom of speech. They even said they had a right to say it under freedom of speech. And we all know who they are, which is obviously the commonly cited Nazis. But they exercised it, and they created such a mass hysteria amongst the average German, the average liberal German, by the way, that it caused a genocidal massacre. And now what we're seeing is now under the same kind of very similar economic conditions, we're seeing a rise of this hysteria again, another Semitic religion, a minority, and lo and behold, even the arguments they use is exactly the same. This group of people, you can't trust them, they're a fifth column, they want to take over the world, their Bible, their book compels them to do this. Identical, quote for quote, with what the Nazis said about Jews. In fact, even the guy who published in German, I think, the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which was an anti-Jewish book, there was Jews weren't happy about this, and that guy himself, was it Theo van Gogh himself, also was killed by a Jewish guy. And the Germans said, "Look at the Jews, look at them. Yeah, look how violent they are. Look how they suppress our freedom of speech." It's history repeating all over again. So I think that if we want to repeat history all over again, then sure, have this freedom of speech and say whatever you want and demonize whoever you want all the way to the gas chamber. Or you can say, wait a second, maybe we should learn from history, and maybe you shouldn't just hate people and you shouldn't just say anything you could, because human beings are not fully rational beings. We can act on ignorance, we can act on hysteria, and we can do very horrible things to people we think are a threat to us. So we say, these Jews amongst us, or these Muslims amongst us, or these Irish amongst us, or these blacks amongst us. The problem is with Britain, we have to sort them out. And we know where that leads. So all I'm saying is a bit of common sense, and more importantly, we can, as they say, the pen is mightier than the sword. So why we keep focusing on the sword but ignoring the pen? Doesn't the pen sign the deaths of millions under the sword?
Just quickly.
Sure.
I definitely agree that the kind of anti-Muslim sentiment that we see in the media a lot at the moment is toxic and is leading to, general, at humanist events, I've had people come up to me and say, oh, Muslims are going to take over the world, we've got to, counteract this somehow. And it's like, you're like a nice, aren't you sane? Okay. And, it just comes out of nowhere from people that you would not expect. And I think it's a separate issue that's a larger issue. The media can't just be prevented from talking about anything in the Middle East, for example. It's a really, really subtle problem, and I don't know how we can tackle it, but curbing freedom of speech against, saying bad things about Muslims overall is probably too much of a blanket thing to do, because it would mean that, for example, if there was a massive terrorist attack and Muslims were perpetrators, you wouldn't be allowed to comment on it. And how do we draw the line? It needs to be much more gentle, is what I'm saying. I don't know, I actually don't know how, but it's, yeah.
Again, I think this is where education comes in key. You have to educate yourself on the subject you're talking about. Do not speak about something you can't back up. Why would you do that?
That's not the point.
But it's completely baseless. But I see what you're saying, that's not the point. But okay, there's a terrorist attack. They happen to be Muslim. That doesn't blanket every Muslim out there. You should make sure, you should get the facts and get it straight. You do not write a headline to sell papers, you write a headline for the truth. That's how it should be. The truth is absolute. There is only one truth. It's not subjective, it's objective. Say the headline, say it as it is. It is then up to you to make an informed decision from that. If you cannot do that, then why you shouldn't be speaking. It sounds a bit harsh, but...
My comeback to that is that the Daily Mail already exists. And we can't just say, no, Daily Mail, all of you are obviously inciting and there's undercurrents.
Why can't we do that?
Well, because it's a legitimate newspaper, and whilst a lot of the things they say are sensationalist, they're not actually breaking English law, and if they're not breaking English law, then unfortunately they are allowed to publish what they're saying. So you either have to say that we make this illegal, or that we have to deal with the fact that people are really irresponsible and stupid.
Okay, I think we'll end that one there.
It's you next.
Could you do your 7-minute introduction into this topic? I know we've kind of divulged.
I thought we were spending 7 minutes on the question.
It's kind of, you can say your part now instead of commenting.
Well, each person gets 7 minutes to answer the question.
I see. This will take a long time. Okay. I don't know if I have anything. I think I should pass and just comment on other people.
That's fine.
Okay. As I said before, the issue of freedom of speech is it's very curious to how it kind of snakes its way around the taboos of the society. So the taboos of the society cannot be spoken out against. So if you want to take coffins down Wootton Bassett to show about the casualties in the war or burn a poppy, then that's a taboo in this society, and you can't do that. But if you want to go against taboos of other societies or other people, that's fine, as long as it's not taboo of this society. Now, I know there's difference of opinion amongst people in this society as to what should be sacred or not. But some very interesting points. There are certain things which we know are sacred, such as no one says that, well, you shouldn't have racial hatred laws because that impinges free speech. If someone wants to insult, make a derogatory comment, or discuss maybe pseudo-scientifically the inferiority of various other races except, let's say, the white English race, they should be allowed to do so. And you can hear these people on YouTube attempting to do that, but not saying it outwardly because they know they're going to get arrested, which is why we have these laws. They restrict your speech. So they try to disguise in all the ways, but they are saying that basically people are saying that why don't we just get rid of the racial hatred laws because it's a legitimate area of inquiry. Obviously, public order offences. So, as you know, you're prohibited from using insulting and abusive language, and of course to cause harassment, alarm and distress. People say that you can't restrict freedom of speech when it comes to offense, because offense is subjective. Well, okay, fine. I don't actually take the view of the issue of offense. I take the view of the intent to insult. That's a much more cast iron definition. I don't mind if someone says something I disagree with, but if they intend to insult me, then as a human being, I feel humiliated, I feel degraded, and every human being naturally requires respect. It is a part of our human nature. Any law that doesn't grant that to a human being is going to have a lot of trouble. So, but in the current law, courts have to determine, what is a distress, what is alarm, what is abusive language. The courts decide it currently, so you can't say, even the argument of saying, abusive language or offensive language is ambiguous. Well, the courts decide ambiguous terms all the time. Obviously, that's public order offences. You've also, I could continue. You've got libel and slander. You've got the various sexual harassment, which, funnily enough, says that if a person creating an offensive environment for a woman, for example, based on her sexuality, is breaking the law, the sexual harassment law. An offensive environment. Interesting. What's offence? I thought we couldn't define it. So there are so many laws. Obviously there are kind of things that go for the privacy laws, the Data Protection Act. You can't just speak someone's private information to other people, and so on and so forth. And in terms of damages under libel and slander, we know that there are things such as injured feelings and disappointment, or injured reputation. These things are not tangible. You're not physically harming them, but injured feelings will grant you damages in a law of court. Court of law, sorry. So this is the kind of things that we actually find in the current legal system, and it's based on the application of law on humans. So human beings, what is the natural, forget your ideals, what are humans? How do they react? What is human nature? This is where I wanted to bring the discussion to. And if you want to live in a society where everyone has well-being, but everyone's insulting each other and degrading each other, and of course the strongest faction will have more hits than the weaker faction. So the Daily Mail, for example, will be able to demonize a lot of people and support fascists, as they historically have done, like the British Union of Fascists, and even Hitler. The Daily Mail historically supported them up until World War II, coincidentally. So these are the issues, these are the things that you can't have absolute freedom of speech, because humans don't act rational a lot of the time. They go on ignorance. My Christian sister there said a very good point. You said that you shouldn't talk without knowledge, but everyone thinks they know it all. And everyone thinks that not only do they know it all, but you have to listen to them explain to you how they know it all. And when they think they know it all, they also might think that Jews are a problem, Muslims are a problem, and they have to tell the world. I have to tell the world that Jews and Muslims are a problem, otherwise they're going to take over the world, and we'll all be speaking Hebrew and Arabic in 20 years' time or something like that, right? Creeping, Sharia or Halakha, whatever. So these are the kind of things that we have to, really deal with, restricting to prevent inter-ethnic conflict, inter-community conflict, actual fighting, actual killing. It's happened in Bosnia, it's happened in Guatemala, it's happened in Rwanda. We all know that was it hate radio in Rwanda, which talked about the Tutsis as cockroaches. And then we all know how that got the Hutus into a frenzy, and then there were massacres that occurred. And I'm not saying massacres are going to occur, but I am saying that there's going to be fighting, there's going to be mosques getting firebombed, people getting shot in a Sikh temple because they thought it was a mosque. Interesting enough, during Nazi Germany era, synagogues were firebombed, Jews were shot and stabbed on the streets. They used to say that basically if you saw Jews in an area talking to an Aryan girl, they're trying to rape her, they're trying to have sex with her. Where have we heard this before? You see, it's recurring. Now, if you want to continue this cycle of hate and hysteria, then fine, have these unrestricted freedom of speech laws. But if you want to have a civilized society which cares for the well-being of its citizens, you have to restrict this. Now, I'm going to say, I've talked about restriction, let's talk about what I should be allowing. Unfettered intellectual criticism, that's fine. If my colleague here wants to say that she doesn't believe in God, she thinks it's a ridiculous concept, it's an absurd concept, and that I'm following a book written by some guy in the desert, that's fine. That's her intellectual criticism. I accept that. I'm not offended. She's an atheist. Of course she's going to say that. She's hardly going to testify the testimony of faith, is she, in Islam? So I understand that. And as a Muslim, I take these values from the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, who organized the first ever Muslim-Christian debate in the first ever mosque with the Christians of Najran, and it was a 3-day debate. And they, at the end of it, they denied it to his face. That he said, we don't think you're a prophet, i.e., must be a false prophet then. And he didn't get offended. He didn't say, right, kill these guys or attack them or have a riot. No, he actually, at the end of it, they concluded a peace treaty, and they went on their way. He even said before leaving if they'd like to pray their Christian prayers in the mosque. That was before leaving, because it was a long journey. This was the example of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And I'll end on this example of Islamic tolerance, and just to show our consistency in this. As monotheists, as very pure monotheists, one of the most abhorrent current concepts to us theologically is polytheism. We have an intellectual abhorrence to polytheism. But the Quran says, referring to Muslims, how they should deal with polytheists, is do not insult their idols, lest they insult Allah in their ignorance, lest they insult your one God in their ignorance. So treat others as you wish to be treated. So don't insult them. But the Quran is full of, critique, intellectual critique of polytheism, but it never insults them. And isn't those civilized values that we could adopt? Maybe this is some civilized values that we can learn from, so that we can have free speech. Which I might add, the purpose of free speech is the pursuit of truth, not the pursuit of playground activities. Right? It's the pursuit of truth. So we can have free speech for the pursuit of truth, but let's cut down on the ideological Tourette's and on the insults, and actually just deal with the matter at hand and respect each other as human beings. You don't need to respect the belief, but you should respect the human beings who hold that belief. Thank you.
I want to start off by looking at how did the laws of freedom of speech come into power. Now, what we realized was the situation, especially in America and prior to the French Revolution, was that people who spoke out against government or state or the church disappeared. They were being arrested, persecuted for exposing any government issues or speaking out against the government. And in order to protect these people who spoke out and showed their objection against the government, the First Amendment in the American Constitution came about, and likewise the laws in Britain and France. However, Islam didn't really have this problem, because from day one, from the time of the Prophet ﷺ and the rightly guided caliphs that came after, to voice your position against the state or the religion was something that was accepted. As long as it's done in a legitimate manner. And we've got various examples of this in the Muslim tradition. For example, Umar radiallahu anhu, who was the second caliph of Islam, he was the religious and political leader of the time. He got up in a Friday sermon, and in Muslim custom, we have, when a man and woman get married, a man gives a woman a dowry, a marriage gift of a certain value, which is negotiated between the two. And what was happening during that time, women were negotiating high amounts, making it very difficult for somebody to get married. It's like, oh my God, I'm going to have to fork out so much money to marry her. So he wanted to deal with this in society, and he came out saying that we need to limit the amount of money that women can ask for. And this was done in a Friday sermon, and a woman, remember this is a woman, about 1400 years ago, got up to the head of the state and the head of the religious power at that time, and she said, "Oh Umar, who are you to put a restriction on something that Allah has not restricted upon us?" And Umar turned around and said to the woman is right, and Umar has been defeated, and he sat down accepting her criticism and changing the policy. So you see, such valid criticism of the state or valid opposition to religious or political power is something that Islam's always allowed. But it has to be legitimate and done with the intent to improve society. Now, if you look at the videos of innocence of Muslims and the cartoons that came out, why is it that Muslims are so offended? Well, first of all, it's not just restricted to Muslims wanting an exclusive protection against insults to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. We will be just as offended with any criticisms against Prophet Moses, against Jesus, and even people that we don't regard to be prophets, like Guru Nanak and so forth. You cannot mock and insult people, and especially with lies. And if anyone's watched The Innocence of Muslims or the cartoons, they will see this is just like pure make-take and pure factual lies. The Prophet ﷺ is depicted as a homosexual in The Innocence of Muslims. The stuff don't want to repeat what's in there, but they're factual lies. It's not an opinion that's come about through any documented facts. And likewise in the cartoons, like the Danish cartoons that came out, they showed Prophet Muhammad wearing a suicide bomb. Now, what kind of, criticism or intellectual discourse is this? This is pure mick-taking and reinforcement of negative stereotypes of Muslims in the media. And this is what we oppose, and it's not restricted to just Islam. We would restrict any mocking and, mick-taking of any prophet or religious figures. And, and you have to realize why Muslims feel so hurt when this happens, because we are taught to love the Prophet Muhammad more than ourselves. So just imagine if somebody came out, published photos, published, insulting comments about your daughter, your wife, your child. How would you feel? And going back to the question, in a civilized society, do we want to be able to do this? Is it civil to go out and insult people's daughters? Is it civil to go out and insult people's wives? Is it civil to go and insult people's mothers? And most of you, I'm sure, would not go out and do that randomly, baselessly. Now, if we wouldn't do it and from an Islamic perspective, if you wouldn't do it to somebody who's related to you or somebody who's closer to you, Prophet Muhammad, somebody who's more dearer than that, I would personally, even though I wouldn't accept it, I would personally have somebody insult my own mother than insult my Prophet. And this is the pain we feel when such false accusations and mick-take has been done against Islam.
Jenny has a comment.
Yeah, this is a comment really for both of you two. I was really, when you started speaking, the kind of roots of freedom of speech in, well, we've got to be able to defend ourselves if we're being oppressed. I guess the problem is, whilst we all know that Muslims are plotting to take over the world, how does that guy who's convinced himself that that's true know, he's actually convinced that this is true and he wants to tell the world, whilst it's not factual, like you're going to just say, oh, well, he's just been miseducated. Yes, there are crazy people all the time who've been miseducated, but the problem is it's very difficult for society to say you're wrong and you're right if, like, there are a lot of people who believe something that's probably wrong, like all Muslims are going to kill everyone. But we need to be able to defend ourselves if that's true. So how do we actually, like, I'll ask you, how do we make the law defined so, rather than in terms of offence and whatever, like, what are you allowed to say? Like, it should, I suppose it should just go through courts, and if it's demonstrably proved to be false, as is the case with Anders Breivik, the Norwegian chap, I guess that's probably a good example, a counter-example, where he has worked himself up into a massive frenzy, and the courts of law have actually taken him through and said, no, we don't actually think that Muslims are going to take over Norway. But kind of, there's got to be middle ground where you can't defend yourself without free speech, but you still need to be able to offend people for that.
Yeah, I'll answer the question.
Yeah. Doesn't make sense.
Okay. You've made a valid point. And I think Abdullah has answered this to some extent. If somebody has a fear or concern, Muslims are not saying you cannot do this in an academic manner. We've got years and years of Orientalists criticizing Islam, people, dismantling Islamic tradition and so forth. And any intellectual criticism is a valid thing. And, I would not be offended if you came to me and said, I don't believe that this man in the middle of a desert 1400 years ago came out with this book, and then you try and explain your reasons why. We're not opposing criticism, and we're not opposing you to express your opinion. What we're opposing is you taking a mick. Just like you would appreciate that, I might find something about you which is distasteful, and I can say that in a nice manner, and then I could go out and take your photo, print it out, abuse you. And we've actually got laws in this country that protect, libel laws and so forth, that will protect individuals who are alive. But, when it comes to protecting somebody who's deceased, such as the prophets, it doesn't extend to protecting them. So we're not saying don't criticize us. We're saying we'll actually give you the platform. If Richard Dawkins wanted to come, we'll set up a debate with Richard Dawkins if anybody wants. We'll give you the platform to criticise us, but do it in an academic manner.
We have a counter. Yeah.
Can you, do you want to come back on that? As in, why is it different when someone's deceased and someone's alive?
Well, the deceased one I haven't thought about. I'd like to think about that and come back later, probably at some stage. No, I think it's a really valid comment, but in that case, should all satire of everything ever be banned? Like, I don't know, there are a lot of comedians say a lot of things that are quite taboo, and should everything like that be banned as well under this? I guess is my question. But
again, with this civilized country, I think we're operating on the assumption that human beings are just happy, chappy, great, like we get bored and we're just nice people. It's not. It sounds a bit harsh, but it's not in our nature to be nice. We get taught to be polite. We get taught to be considerate. From when you're being taught to be polite and considerate, and there is a problem, you're not. It's not in your nature to be nice. So clearly, it's not going to be a thing of, okay, so where are the laws, where are the restrictions? This is where Christianity comes in. And out of the issues of your heart, that's what comes out. So in the Bible it says, think of things that are pure, think of things that are thoughtful, think of things that will not hurt others. If that's in your heart, then we wouldn't have a discussion about what can we say, what can we not say, because in your heart you don't want to cause intolerance, you don't want to cause hate. It says in the Bible, love your enemies. Those who slap you, turn the other cheek. If you have that in your heart already, there will be no need for, what can we say, what is this law about? It's all about the issues of our heart. I suppose we're assuming that when we are born, we're just born as nice people. We're not. I can't stress that enough.
Thank you. I've listened with interest, and I've heard the points about what the Daily Mail does. I've heard points about intellectual critique. Is that correct? And analysis. And I think they're all sound and noble points. But let's be clear: it's not going to happen. You live in a society where insults and sensationalism sells, and that is the world that we live in. We have to accept that we live in a community where people are nice, they're abrasive, they are untruthful, they are sinister, they treat individuals, they treat their friends with contempt, let alone people who they don't consider friends. I think it's our responsibility, for whatever belief system you come from, to recognise that it's down to your individual self to withstand that vile venom. That's your responsibility. One of my favourite events was it's an example that I want to share with you, is between Muhammad Ali and George Foreman. And the way that Muhammad Ali was successful in that fight was that he was able to disturb George Foreman with insults, and that is how he got him out of his game. He was able to talk about how slow he was, how thick he was. He was just downright rude. But I sense that that's what's happening in this debate, that the insults that are coming externally are upsetting what you do internally. And surely that can't happen. Surely in your belief system, or in my belief system, we are to expect that people are going to be sinister and they're going to try and disrupt us. But it's down to us as the individual to gird ourselves and say, actually, I'm going to move forward irrespective of the nonsense that you're spewing. Now, we can't expect, or I can't expect, for somebody else to alter their course, however sinister it may be. It's down to me as an individual to withstand that. Now, for me to say, you must be banned, well, I can't see how that can fly myself. I think it's my responsibility, however difficult. I'm not saying that it's not difficult. However, it's my responsibility to develop enough character to withstand anything that the outside world throws at me. And I'm not saying for one moment that it's appropriate, that it's right, but that's not my call, what that person does over there. And I think that's really what we should focus on, our ability to withstand the venom that may come your way throughout life.
Basically, from what you said, I understand you're basically saying that regardless of how it should be ideally, the reality is that people are going to mock and take the insult, and we need to accept that. But also the reality is that people are going to rape, we're going to have paedophiles in our society. Do we just accept that and not put laws in place to prevent and protect these people?
We have got laws.
Exactly. This is my point. We have laws to protect children. We've got laws to protect women from being raped, but we don't have laws to protect what you and I have both agreed is an insult and shouldn't be allowed among civilized people, or is something that civilized people shouldn't do. But we've got no law to protect that. Why should we not have laws that protect people who are dead, but we have laws that protect people who are alive?
We have got laws to protect freedom of expression and privacy law. We have got laws to protect freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, and all those things, freedom of thought. We have got those laws. What I'm saying to you is that because we have those qualified rights, it might not always be nice, and so it's our responsibility as believers to say, this is something that I must personally circumnavigate. I can't control what happens outside of my domain. What is within my control and within my remit is the ability to withstand the barrage of abuse which falls outside of civil law. If it's something which is contrary to the law of the land, then that's for the authorities to deal with. Now, I'm not saying it's easy, but those are our options.
But I think we have to stop you.
Right, just a very key point. Why don't we go to Afro-Caribbean members of this community and say, we shouldn't ban anyone from insulting your race or your color or the shape of your nose or any of these things. We should let them do so, and you must be thick-skinned about it. You must withstand the barrage of those insults against you.
That's not what I'm saying.
I know. But you see,
if you know that, you should.
Wait. No, because you see, the thing is this. We have restrictions on what you can insult in this country. You can't insult any aspect in this country of a human being. Generally speaking, the restriction is that if you insult what is common to a community, so for example, race is common to a community, so you can't insult that. The reason being is because you don't want to be, you want to prevent, people feeling humiliated, offending or hurting them at their kind of need for respect. So you have these limitations, and these limitations are there. Now I say, well, you had this for race, and we know that the British Parliament tried to do the same for religion with the religious hate laws. But obviously there was a lot of protest as to, it was worried that you couldn't criticize religion after that, which I don't think was the case. But basically, what defines you more? Your belief or your skin color? What defines your identity and personality more? Your skin color or your belief? It's your belief. Yet you can insult that, which defines you as a human being, and a community, but you can't insult a superficial aspect of yourself, which is just your skin color. It's like saying we should have a law against hating people with blue eyes or gingers. All right? This is, I'm saying that, look, either you equalize the laws for race hate to hating a group of people based on their religion, or inciting hatred against people because of their religion, or you abolish all of it. Be consistent. That is all, we're asking. You are correct, my colleague over there is correct, that whatever we say today is not going to have that much effect on the political system in this country. And there is sensationalism, and there are media moguls and people who basically, sensationalize themselves, and that's business, that's capitalism and so on. That's true. But we are having a discussion as to what is moral and what should we do. And if we already have laws in place that restrict hate speech against a community of people for something which is superficial, then we should have, by logical extension, laws that ban hate speech against the very identities of people, what makes them who they are.
Can I take the question over there, please?
Who's...
I'll take it. No, just-
skin colour can't, that's why they should be attacked. If your beliefs are wrong, they should be acceptable to be attacked. The other thing is, lots of people have said that the truth of the statement matters and the benefit it has to society matters. If a statement is untrue and has no benefit, it should be banned, like creationism. Should the religious also not be allowed their hate speech? Should priests not be allowed to say that gay marriage is wrong? Gay marriage is something that is a big part of people's belief because of their personal identity. Should imams and priests be allowed to say gay marriage is wrong, being gay is wrong? And if so, why is that different to me saying, no, I don't want to believe in your prophet?
From now on, I think if you can just speak up, and then I'll repeat the question so everyone else can hear, because it's a long transition. I'll let Abdullah answer that, and then we'll go to the rabbi.
I'll be very brief. You see, yes, this argument, beliefs can change, but skin colour can't change, and that's an argument. Okay, well then why not we persecute people for their beliefs, because they can change. You can force convert someone to become atheist or Christian or communist or whatever, because they can change. It's a matter of choice. It's not a matter of something they can't, it's not immutable. No, I can't tell this person next to me to stop believing in God, and she says, yes, it's just a matter of my choice. I just chose to not to believe in God. No, she's probably not convinced. And she probably will say that there is no evidence that she has convinced her. So it's not a matter of choice for her, because she's just not convinced. That's what she'll say. It's not a matter of choice. Your beliefs are, you follow your conscience, and you don't have a choice in your conscience. If you do, then you're a cynical hypocrite, basically. And unless you want a society that rewards cynicism or hypocrisy, you should have a society, you should advocate a society whereby people can be principled people, hold their beliefs, not be coerced out of them. So it is different. And besides, I could answer you back in terms of skin color change. Someone could say Michael Jackson, yeah, but we won't go there. Anyway, when it comes to truth and untruth statements, I didn't say ban something because it's true or not true. I didn't even say that those people who think that Muslims are trying to take over the world, that just by saying that per se, that should be banned. No. What I'm saying is insult, gratuitous insult. It serves no intellectual purpose. No one can, I wait someone who can rationalize to me why gratuitous insult must be allowed, how it serves some great purpose. Use any basis you want. If you want to use utilitarianism, please do so. Use natural law theory, please do so. But please tell me from any basis why gratuitous insult should be allowed, but even though it serves no intellectual benefit and purpose. And what I mean by gratuitous insult is insulting beliefs which are held sacred, wherever they might be. Now, yeah, fine, insult prime ministers if you wish, insult whoever, presidents if you wish, and so on. That's fine. I suppose that's part of the culture now. But insulting things which people hold sacred, this is something different, and it's intentional insult, not offense. Not that they take offense to what you say. It's that you intended it. That's what I wish to see limited. It serves no purpose, and I've even read obviously John Stuart Mill's on liberty discussion on free speech and things. Great discussion he did, but even he saw the problem of even he saw the need to restrict by some means gratuitous insult, and demonization of minorities or majorities, but mostly minorities, which causes them to be discriminated against in society, which is natural human nature. When you demonize a minority, they'll start to be discriminated against, and there's nothing you can do to stop that. And that's unfortunate, that's human nature. So these are the discussions at hand, and I think that's why allow open discussion, open criticism, but do not allow gratuitous insult of communities and demonization of them.
I have to pass this on to Rabbi Cohen to see his opinion on this matter.
I found it very interesting listening to all the opinions. I'll try to give a little insight into what I would look at the question, how I would look at the question from the point of view of an Orthodox Jew, that is, a Jew who tries to live his life in accordance with the Jewish religion. We talk about freedom of speech. Now, we live in very liberal times comparatively to what has been the position over the centuries historically. And in most what's called civilized countries, people nowadays are able to live their lives as they want, which is a very precious right, to live their lives, if they're religious people, to live their lives in accordance with their religion. And tied up with that is the question of freedom of speech, and that is the question of being able to say what you want, but what we mean by freedom of speech. First of all, it would mean being able to express openly my own views about how I want to live my life, and not have to be stifled in any way. Nobody's ready to say to me, you cannot express views of how you want to live. That is very precious. That is a very basic aspect of freedom of speech. It goes further than that, the question of being able to criticize actions and philosophies and policies of a fellow man and other groups of people. And that again is a very precious right, if it is done in what is known as a civilized manner. But then it goes on further. Before I say I get on to possibly the next stage, is this. As an Orthodox Jew, there have been many occasions where I've had the opportunity to be involved in what is termed as interfaith discussions, and very often groups of different faiths, they like to have discussions and do some sort of comparison between one faith and another. And I always say that should be avoided when it comes to creed and ritual and religious belief. Everyone to themselves, and that again is part of freedom and freedom of speech, to be able to live one's own religion, one's own way of life in the way one wants to. To have to compare it with somebody else's way of life can be very, very difficult, because if one is brought up to believe a certain way, a certain belief, one, in the best will of the world, will think that the other way is not quite correct, so why discuss it? Better each one to their own and live happily alongside each other. But when it comes to, there are other aspects, though, of interfaith cooperation, and that is on matters of humanitarian cooperation, compassion for one man to another. That's where all are equal, everybody should help each other. Now, just to home in on this question of which we're discussing, from a Jewish religious point of view, a very important aspect of life is to consider one's fellow man, and to not to do anything to upset one's fellow man. And included in that requirement is not to say anything which will insult what the other person thinks is important, irrespective of what my own opinion is of whether that matter is important or precious or not. But if my fellow man, my fellow colleague, thinks that a certain subject is important, then obviously, if I'm going to insult him, I'm hurting him very greatly, and that, in that way, I'm transgressing the requirement, the religious requirement, to have compassion for one's fellow man. So, if one would want to say that one should extend the right of freedom of speech to the ability to insult one's fellow man personally, anybody would understand, other speakers have mentioned that's wrong, but I think it's quite obvious that also to insult something which one's fellow man feels is precious, is important, is equally wrong. Even though I personally might not think very much of the other person's opinion or or the importance that the other person attaches to that thing. So, therefore, I think it would be fairly obvious that certainly from a personal moral point of view, freedom of speech cannot extend to saying anything which will insult my fellow man or insult anything which he thinks is important. I may criticize his philosophies, I may criticize his ideas, yes, but that doesn't incorporate, that doesn't include insulting. Of course, the problem is that we're talking about whether it should be allowed to legislate for this sort of thing becomes very, very difficult, because it does verge on the subjective, and to legislate on the subjective is extremely difficult. So you have the question of legislation, but you have the question of personal conduct. So as far as personal conduct is concerned, it should be quite clear that one should never be allowed to do anything or say anything which will upset and insult something which is considered to be important by one's fellow man and one's fellow group. As to whether this can be incorporated in a legal code, well, of course, ideally that should be the case, but that is not something that we here can decide on, because that is something up to the legislators.
Can I take? Yeah.
I just want to answer his question really quickly.
Okay, then I'll let you know, and then we'll go to the.
I loved your question. Like everyone thinks about when everyone says it, and from the Bible, Jesus never condemned. He challenged and he convicted. And what we've done as human beings is we've put a hierarchy of sin. In the Bible, there's no sin is sin. So you see people going around saying, "Oh my God, I hate the gays." They should go around saying, "I hate the lies. I hate people who are mean to each other. I hate people who don't read the Bible." That's not what God asked us to do. He asked us to challenge people's beliefs and then convict them. You can't force someone to believe in something they don't want to. If you do that, that's wrong. That's not what the Bible is. That's not what the Bible has asked. That is completely baseless. And so people going around going, "Oh my gosh," they put a hierarchy on sin. And that's not the Bible. What the Bible says is challenge and convict. If you've challenged and if you've convicted and that's not happened, then you go your own way. What they've done is they've pretty much discriminated, which is not fair, which is completely not biblical in any sense of the word. Again, I know we're talking about putting laws to stop people insulting people and making sure that everyone's all happy-chappy and making sure that no one's offended by it. But then again, we have so many laws out now, and people still get away with doing things. Clearly, the law is not working. It's all about, when Jesus came, it was during the time where the Jews were being, there was the Romans were taxing the Jews, and they were at that time, they wanted a political Messiah, but Jesus didn't come for that. He came for our hearts. That shows how crucial our heart is. There isn't an amount of law you can put up that will stop people from being mean, because it's in our nature. That's who we are. It's about changing from the inside out, and that's what Jesus preached about. So putting laws, I'm sure they'd help, here and there. But I've heard the saying, laws are made to be broken. You can always find a loophole. Laws are not effective. It's from the inside out. The change has to start from us, from the inside.
Stop it. Can I take a question from the man in the white jumper? You can stand up and speak. I'll repeat your question.
Does he want to get the microphone to him?
No, you just say it out loud. I'll repeat.
I'm a Christian, but I would like to ask this: what do we mean by freedom of speech? It's been said on the panel that we must not offend. It's said that we must be educated. We must educate ourselves before we speak. We must seek truth. Is freedom of speech about speaking about truth, or is it about expressing yourself? The religious people on the panel who believe in a God, the God you believe in created you, gave you a brain. All that speech is an expression of thoughts. So therefore, if we constrain thoughts, are we then constraining the very natural essence in us? Every religious person on there believe in evil. Satan, Lucifer, he spoke against God, and yet he is alive today because God allowed him freedom of expression. I hate what you believe. I find it disgusting what you believe, but I will fight for your right to say it. As long as there isn't an incitement to hatred, in terms of the offense that you give, offense isn't just about what is said, but also it is how someone else takes it. What if I want to express what I perceive to be truth and you decide to be offended by it? I think you should lose weight. I find that offensive. So therefore, I shouldn't say it. I think the concept of freedom of speech is a lot more complex than that which has been put forward so far.
Would you like a particular panelist to come on that?
Because everyone is religious, apart from this lady here, I would like to hear what she has to say, and then maybe someone who's religious who you would choose, Sean.
So I'd first like to start off by addressing the thing about kind of the connection between thought and speech. There are separate rights in the Human Rights Act on freedom of conscience and freedom of speech, freedom of conscience, and freedom of belief. So you are allowed to believe whatever you like, and there can be no restrictions on that because it's inside your head, and there shouldn't be external you shouldn't be implored to believe something that you don't believe, like no one should force me to try and believe in God. Those are the rights which are more, they kind of take a precedence over freedom of speech because they're so much easier to protect and so much more fundamental to a person's well-being. It's very easy for me to want to be able to say, oh, I hate black people or some such. But I would not say that because it's illegal, obviously. So the freedom of speech is the one that you curtail in order to protect people's higher precedence right, which is their freedom of conscience and their freedom of sort of being autonomous and not persecuted. So that's the first thing I would say on that. But the kind of thing you went on to say about it's the line between offence and sort of the more incitement to hatred. And I would agree, and I'm actually going to put forward something that I just thought of now. I think that it should be illegal to depict Prophet Muhammad if it were getting to the stage where every day there was a cartoon in the Daily Mail which, was a picture of Prophet Muhammad dressed as a pig or something, which would be really bad. If that were happening every day, that would be a systematic demonisation or insult. It would be more than an insult. And I think that there's got to be some way of formalising this, which I probably can't articulate now, but there's got to be a line between people making short jokes about me, which will always happen, and I just have to be resilient against that, and people saying, oh, atheists are evil, atheists are evil, atheists are evil, every second of every day. There's got to be a line somewhere. And obviously the courts would be the place to decide that. I don't know.
I think Abdullah would like to give some.
Yeah, I like a very quick comment. Satan is not free. He doesn't have free speech because free speech means you don't get punished for it. But I think you know that Satan will get punished for it. So, no, it's just a delayed punishment, you could say. As for, you said thoughts, thoughts, speech, action, they're all connected. This is the whole point. Thoughts, speech, action, it's all connected. And the proof of this, the law understands this. You see, the English law, being very pragmatic that it is, and American law and many other laws, ban incitement to violence, incitement to murder. But you could just say, hey, I didn't commit the murder. I just told the people. They are rational beings. They can decide for themselves. Yeah, but they know that you incite, generally, human beings, being what they are, they're going to probably do, one idiot's going to probably do it, going to do a murder after being incited to do so. So this is why the law has banned incitement to murder, incitement to violence, and so on and so forth. So again, the law doesn't believe that yeah, fine, you can say what you want, it has no connection. You can't separate thought and action, they are intrinsically linked. There's no action without thought. I want to make very, very, very clear, we're talking about intention to insult, which according to law, a lot of the laws against banning, against speech, look at intent. They don't look at the actual, racial hatred laws does look at the effect. But other laws look at the intent. So did you intend this? If you intended this harassment, then you'll be sanctioned by the law. So I'm saying intention to insult or demonize a community based on a commonly shared aspect of their identity. That's what I'm saying should be banned. As for offense, anyone could be offended by anything that's been said. I probably said a few things that have been offensive to people who might hold certain theological doctrines different to mine. Without intention, I wasn't insulting them. But that's fine. I don't talk about offense. I talk about, insult. I'll give you an example. Let's say you go to Italy, I think it's Italy, and someone bites their thumb at you. You won't know what that means. You probably think it's funny. But if someone tells you, oh, by the way, that's actually an insult in Italy, then you'll get angry. Then you'll get upset. The action itself didn't hurt you. It was that you found it was funny. But when you heard that another human being intended to degrade you or humiliate you, then you felt upset about that. Then you felt angry about that. It's a natural human response. And we're dealing with humans here. We're not dealing with angels. And as humans, we react to being humiliated or degraded. Lastly, just to answer Lola's point, so the law is not preventing hate speech. Well, the law's not preventing rape, murder, arson, burglary. So should we repeal the law? Should we abolish the law? No, we have to apply this law. It's about applying it. And of course, the racial hatred laws are working efficiently, sometimes even too efficiently. We're seeing the BNP were forced to accept non-white members, for example. They couldn't discriminate. For example, even the EDL have to pretend to be multicultural or whatever, okay, that's disputed, but they have to, even though most of their members are pretty much all white and they have a few token people of different ethnic groups, even they had to pretend to be not racist, basically. So during the 80s, racism was very rampant in this country. In the 90s, it was still very rampant, but it's calmed down after people have been silenced from openly preaching racism as they used to do in the past. Now, we still got a way to go, but it helps, it works, to some degree. It helps. That's why we have laws. So that's all I want to say. As I said, I want to make very clear, open criticism, open debate. In fact, I remember my organization hosted a debate between Carlton MacDonald, which was a friend of yours, on the topic of Jesus and Islam and things like this. And there was criticism of the Quran in it, there was criticism of the Bible in it. And, we came in amicably and we left amicably, and that's fine, because we did it respectfully. We were having a go at each other, but intellectually, but we weren't degrading each other as human beings who hold beliefs sacred. And that's what I'm advocating.
Yeah. Would you like to come in?
I need to clear something up. One of the books that was given to me, The Ideal Muslim, I don't know if anybody's read that book. Anybody? The Ideal Muslim? Okay, I think it's a great literature. I just need you to explain what this means to me. The active Muslim, he mixes with people and puts up with their insults, is the subheading. The active Muslim mixes with people and bears their insults with patience, because he is a man with a mission who has a message to deliver. Whoever undertakes this important mission should be prepared to accept the fact that he will have to make sacrifices and be patient with the foolish ideas that people have, their bad behavior, their suspicions and hard-hearted natures, their laziness and slow response to truth, their focus on their own salvation interest. I'm going to cut it there. I'm struggling. Can you explain, because I may have missed it, but explain what that actually means? Because I'm not Muslim, I'm Christian, but what does that mean in your belief system?
Okay, first of all, you're quoting a book. Basically, he's quoting what an author's view is on an issue here. No, I mean, I would presume somebody who preaches...
It's commentary. It's commentary.
Yeah, it's commentary. I would presume...
Explain. I mean, does it have any basis?
Yeah, I'll come to answer that. But what I'm trying to say here is, if you're going to examine a religion, you look at the text. So I would expect somebody to come up with a Quran or a prophetic tradition and then say...
They are referring to the Quran, but this is a commentary on the passage within the Quran.
No, this actually is basically talking about the character of somebody who's going out and presenting Islam to people, and while presenting Islam to people, they'll be criticised, and you need to be able to take that on board. That's basically what it's speaking about. Okay. So it's not actually talking about an ayah or hadith here. But I mean, like, for example, if I was to examine Christianity, if I was to look in Leviticus 24, it says, for anybody who blasphemes against the Lord, a community should stone them to death. Okay. That's examining text, that's examining literature and saying, okay, well, according to your text, if somebody blasphemes or insults your religion, the community should stone them. Now, what have you got to say about that? So if you want a Muslim response...
Are you wanting me to respond?
You could respond after I finish. So that would be like an academic, examination of literature, not a commentary. Now, basically, what we're saying is, I'm not objecting against that commentary. I'm actually saying...
It sounds like it.
No. I'm putting it into context. I'm saying when quoting Islamic literature, you quote Quran and Hadith, you can't quote a general book, like I've just quoted biblical literature. But what I'm saying is, I'm not justifying a violent Muslim response to an insult to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So I'm saying, okay, these videos have come out, these cartoons have come out. Now Muslims shouldn't react aggressively and violently. And I'm first to condemn the violent reaction that came from aspects of the Muslim community. And they should take this advice and be strong and deal with it in the best of manners. But what we're actually discussing here is, should the people who are mocking a religion be allowed to do so in the first place? You're talking about the reaction. We should internally be nice to ourselves, we should overcome this stuff. The reaction's fine. I'm with you with your reaction. We as Muslims, or we as people of faith, need to rise above any attack made against us and react in an appropriate manner. But we're saying, what is the cause of that reaction, and is that cause allowed in the first place in a civil society?
Well, I'm glad that you agree and that you don't feel insulted by what I've said. What I'm talking about is what is outside of my control as a Christian, and I do think it's my responsibility, and for the little that I know or have read in your community, that there is a similar ideology that there is self-control is paramount when faced with adversity. Is that something that we agree on? Okay, so if we're in a situation where insults are flying, I have no control over that. So for me to say that I believe in free choice, and I believe that you do too, no?
It depends what you mean by free choice.
Okay.
I don't have the freedom to go and rape somebody if that's my free choice.
Well, you do, but it would be illegal. So
that's not free choice.
Free choice.
Okay, so basically, people can do exactly what they want. There are laws of the land, there is a moral compass that I subscribe to, and I suspect you subscribe to. It's not identical, but we believe in a higher power that governs what we do. So, rape, using your example, would be wholly inappropriate for the belief systems that we belong to.
So that's freedom restricted by religious belief.
But that's our moral compass. Yeah, but I can't override anybody else's, and I'm not trying to. All I can do is govern what I do. Now, going back to the point on insults, what I'm struggling with here is, how will I know what is insulting to you? And is what is insulting to you as insulting to another? It is exactly the same thing as insulting to your Muslim brother. I don't know, because two statements could have a completely different impact on two different individuals from the same belief system. So when you talk about criticisms are allowed, but insults aren't. Well, somebody who's criticised can see that as an insult, and another person may not see that as an insult. So you need to be quite crisp in what you mean by that and how one is able to measure that. Sorry.
Yes, just on the question of you can insult, you can criticize, sorry. One can criticize a view, one can criticize a philosophy, one can criticize a way of life. Well, if it verges on the personal, if it verges on the, once you insult a way of life, once you mock a way of life, then that becomes personal. That should not be something that should be allowed. As I said earlier, it's not something that's easily legislated against. We can only talk about personal, what one has to adopt as a personal moral standard. But I think the personal moral standard should be, I can criticize the other person's philosophy or view or whatever it is, political view, but not let it verge onto personal, something which will be a personal insult. If you mock, that tends to become personalized. There's a difference between criticism and mocking.
Can I pass that to Abdullah, please? Because he wants to make one.
I wanted to respond to his point. I'm going to reiterate for the third time. Insult is not based on the understanding of the recipient, it's the intention of the person that gives it. And we know this, the public order offences in England, I quote, a person is guilty of an offence if, with intent to cause a person harassment, alarm or distress, he uses threatening, abusive or insulting words or behaviour. So the law says, with intent, you must prove intent, and of course that it was insulting words, deliberate insulting words were used. So the law already has that definition there. I think that's a good definition. That was my yardstick. But to answer your point, as Muslims, we are not meant to react violently to insult. The Prophet Muhammad was abused horrendously, violently attacked as well in Mecca, and he did not respond violently or start getting angry, even angry about it, not even visibly angry. He didn't display that. Unfortunately, what you see in the Muslim world is that post-colonialism, they feel very humiliated. They feel that that they don't have any control of their own destiny. They have puppet governments which are in the employ of various foreign powers, and so they feel powerless. You see, if you're an American or a British person and something bad happens, you could trust your government to deal with it. Your government has your best interest at hand. But if your government doesn't have your best interest at hand, and if it has interest of a foreign power at hand, then you're going to feel, humiliated. You're going to feel debased. You're going to feel that you're powerless. So then, when this foreign power, when you hear of insults about what you hold sacred coming from this foreign power, it's kind of like rubbing salt into the wound. Kicking you when you're down. I think they should have exercised restraint. I think they shouldn't have, made these violent demonstrations. But I'd like to draw you to one thing. In Channel 4, there was this documentary, or supposed documentary, of Tom Holland, the untold story of Islam, right, where he basically indulged in some wonderful speculation as to, Prophet Muhammad didn't exist and maybe aliens started Islam, who knows. So, hey, can you disprove it? You can't. Maybe. Huh? So anyway. So, did you see any Muslims rioting about that or even demonstrating about that? No, because we understood he was exercising intellectual criticism. I think he was absurd, but he has a right to exercise intellectual criticism. That's fine, no problem. But gratuitous insult, drawing cartoons about either Muslims or Jews in the past, those things are a different matter entirely. And I wouldn't even have got interested in discussing the issue of calling for some kind of restriction on speech if I wasn't concerned that it would lead to discrimination and perhaps even violence against Muslims, violence against buildings of Muslims, and that's why I'm actually involved in this debate. That's all I'm really concerned. If it's only a minority of people who were saying it and no one really cared about what they were saying, then I'd probably ignore it. I wouldn't feel threatened. But because we feel threatened, we have to come out here and say, look, you have to regulate this because we really don't want a repeat of the mass hysteria that's happened in the past. And it happened to everybody. Irish, blacks, Jews have suffered the brunt, unfortunately. And now just to kind of illustrate what I mean by tolerance, my organisation, so Muslim Debate Initiative, we invited an atheist speaker called Brendan Lavore. I don't know if you've heard of him. No, all right. He's a professor anyway. We invited him to East London Mosque, one of the biggest mosques in Europe. And we had a debate on, does Allah exist? We even made it deliberate. Does Allah exist? Not even does God exist, does Allah exist? We had a public debate, it was 600 people, mostly Muslim, few atheists came down, and it was amicable, and it was friendly, you can see on our website, and that was great. That was intellectual debate, that was intellectual criticism, and this guy was denying God's existence, attacking the concept of God's existence in a mosque. Of course, the media didn't show you that because they didn't sell newspapers, right? But Muslims actually having an intellectual debate in a mosque, we can't show that. So this is what I mean by tolerance. This is what I mean by accepting intellectual criticism, but gratuitous insult and demonization of community, something else.
Could I take a question from the lady at the end of the row?
I was just wondering, we've talked a lot about insulting and about, especially about Islam, but I was wondering about your opinions on why it is that certain religions are allowed to kind of outspeak about, being insulted by, a pastor or something that's happened with them. But all of a sudden when Muslims do it, it's like, oh my gosh, you guys should be able to take insults, you guys should be able to take criticism. But with other religions, it's like, oh no, okay, fine, yeah, we'll do something about that, we'll make sure that they don't do that again. But with Islam, it's kind of like...
Give me an example. Give me an example.
Can you give me an example? Like the example that Sean gave me with the Roman Catholic girl who was with ice cream or something like that. And there's been plenty of different examples where people have said stuff about the Bible, people have said stuff about, the Torah and stuff like that, and everyone has just turned to them and been like, okay, fine, we'll take care of it. But the only example I can think of right now, just in the moment, is the example that Sean used at the beginning of the talk. So I'm just wondering about...
So the question is, do you think there's a disproportionate response between non-Muslims and Muslims? Is there a particular panelist you would like to ask this? Jenny, it seems like this answer.
I don't think that is something that's just accepted, and it's not something that I don't find immensely hurtful. People that are ranting in the office and saying Jesus Christ spontaneously or using it as an adjective, it gets tough. And I don't think that there shouldn't be a protest, and I don't think, possibly it is disproportionate. I think specifically since September the 11th, there seems to be, I noticed the demonisation of the Muslim community. But I think then the question needs to be different. Is it about colonial influences on legislation, or is it about freedom of speech? Because I'm a little bit confused here. Is this, what is the real question? Sorry, I don't know if I've answered your question correctly.
Why is that it's disproportionate, really? Why do you think it is disproportionate?
It's possibly, for those living in England, it's possibly because we live in England. That's possibly why it's disproportionate, or it might seem harsh, or a little bit biased, or a lot biased. It's possibly because where we live. That's my guess. And if we're saying that colonial influences or imperialism has had a devastating impact on minority communities and majority non-white groups, then yeah, that's right. I believe that to be true.
I think there was a genuine clash of cultures where everyone in the West has no idea who this Muhammad guy is, but apparently they're not allowed to depict him. And there's the libertarian type people and the sort of the media who will go, oh, well, we don't need to take into account these new people's, they're all just new and they're a minority, we can stamp on them, which I think has meant that there has been a very, and rightly, vocal reaction from the Muslim community saying, hey, actually this is a big deal to us, can you listen to us? Whereas, I can easily insult Christianity because, they've been around forever, they don't care because they don't have to feel threatened, and that's got to be the basis of it, I think.
Lola, you comment, and then we'll go to the man in the shirt.
I definitely understand. Who asked the question? I definitely understand what you mean, but if we move context, so in Nigeria, churches have been burnt, so they're getting the brunt of the force. But I definitely understand what you're saying. I think it's the whole like 9/11 thing. I think people would just, again, this is why I go back to, it's the content of your heart. If your heart was in the right place, that happened, you'd be able to realize that it wasn't the whole Muslim community. It was a couple of people. It was a very small minority. But people don't want to do that. They want a group they can hate because we just have hate in our heart. And so once we can get the right mindset, then like having issues about should we say this, should we insult other people, will not be a problem. I forget my other point now, but oh, it was so good.
If you remember it, you can come in later.
Yeah.
Can I take the question and the man in the shirt?
Basically, there are a number of cartoons posted in newspapers every day that mock politicians, they mock other countries, they mock the French. Why on earth should Islam be exempt from satirical insults? In fact, secondly, if you look at South Park, they regularly insult everyone, particularly Islam has been offended. Also, you mentioned about intellectual criticism. Do I have to have a degree before I can criticise Islam? Do I have to have a PhD before I can criticise Islam? Am I not allowed to criticise Islam unless I'm dyslexic? It's a very elitist and snobbish attitude you seem to have there. That you have to be a certain intelligence before you can criticise Islam.
So the question, the first question was, people are insulted every day. Why is Islam treated specifically?
Specifically in the context of satire.
Okay, specifically in the context of satire, and you don't see the Muslims responding as vigorously when someone else is insulted. And
particularly in politics, you see that as a regularly.
Yeah.
Why should a religion be particularly not allowed to offend?
Okay, is this directed to Abdullah then, or one of them? Okay, can you?
Okay, I think you misunderstood what intellectual criticism is. You don't have to be an academic to criticize intellectually. I mean, that's the elephant in the room here. I mean, anyone can criticize intellectually. What it means is that you're looking at the facts, you're looking objectively at the issue. You're not looking at subjectively to, I want to degrade those people because I think bad of them. That's degrading people is hate speech, yeah. But criticizing ideas because you want to come to the truth, you want to discourse, you want to debate. That's intellectual criticism. You don't need a degree. Even people in primary school can do that. It's not a problem, right? So I'm not saying that at all. As for Islam, I'm not asking for Islam to be exempt. I'm actually asking for every belief which is held to be sacred, not to be pilloried, and the people who hold on to that belief to be degraded and viewed as either a threat to society, or viewed as subhuman, or just viewed as there's something wrong with them. They don't have the full faculties of a human being. This kind of demonization, this kind of gratuitous insult, it serves no rational purpose. If you can tell me a rational purpose why people should insult each other, I'd accept it. But I haven't heard one. It's just when I feel like it, I must say it. Well, we feel like doing many things in society, but there's repercussions. You try talking to your boss. You try telling your boss what you really think of him. You'll see what repercussions, right? So this is the situation. I'm not asking for Islam to be very special that only it deserves not to be attacked. I'm saying that any belief system which is held to be sacred, including atheism, or it's a belief or unbelief system, anyway, shouldn't be pilloried and attacked or gratuitously. And that's what I'm saying. And just lastly, the issue is not image depiction, right? South Park actually had this episode called The Super Best Friends, whatever it was, and had all these, had Krishna, Jesus, and all kinds of people, including the so-called Prophet Muhammad cartoon. No one had a riot over that. Do you know why? Because he wasn't being insulted. It's very simple. Muslims weren't being insulted. It was pillaring all the religions, that's true, but it wasn't insulting gratuitously people for having X, Y, and Z religion. That's the difference.
Can you give me the Sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to ask a very short question, which is, do you think that, so David Cameron is depicted as like a condom on the back of the G2 magazine, he's a condom head, and that's really insulting to him, and obviously he's not as sacred as the Prophet Muhammad, but if it were like in context, could we depict the Prophet Muhammad in some similar way? And if not, then should we make it illegal to depict David Cameron like that?
Okay. All right. We have libel and slander laws that appropriately deal with insulting people as individuals. So if you can demonstrate emotional damage or distress or loss of reputation, that can be discussed and debated, and whether there's public interest or not on this issue. He's a politician, there's public interest because he's a politician ruling the country, he needs to be accounted as a leader. We believe in accounting a leader too, that's fine. But to actually start demonizing, let's say, average Joe, or maybe even some celebrities who doesn't want to go in the public eye, but is their privacy is invaded, like Kate Middleton and her pictures, and the pictures, revealing pictures, that was slammed down, that was clamped down upon. Why? She felt upset about it, it was hurting her. There's no freedom of speech for the French newspaper to degrade someone like that. That's where the line is drawn. So I hope that's answered the question.
Could I take the question just here, please?
It's more of a clarity question, but sorry, I'm not really backtracking, but it was something that was discussed before by the two gentlemen on the right. It was discussed about how you were saying that, about the difference kind of between insult and criticism. And I'll just give a silly example. For example, I know a lot of people have pets, for example, dogs and cats. Now, I can't stand dogs. Now, if I go about, let's say it's a general consensus, if I say I hate dogs, it's not really frowned upon, it's just your own opinion. Now, even though obviously being Muslim, I'm in support of these this movie or whatever is not being released. But my point is, where does this bar go where a generalized law can personalize itself with each individual? And where does that line come in? Because let's say, for example, if someone's a person of faith who practices a lot, and then there's another who doesn't, the person who practices more will take more offense to something than the other. So where is that line?
So where do you draw the line?
Yeah. Where is this generalized law that will accommodate for everyone?
Right. Just break. All right. The reason why I asked to answer this is I want to reiterate a thing again for a second time. Public order offence. Criminal Justice and Public Order Act 1994, and also there's a Public Order Act 1986. Again, a person is guilty of an offence if, with intent to cause a person harassment, alarm, or distress, he uses threatening, abusive, or insulting words or behaviour, or disorderly behaviour, or displays any writing, sign, or other visible representation which is threatening, abusive, or insulting, thereby causing that or another person harassment, alarm, or distress. That's the law. The courts will look into that, each case, as did you intend to insult, and did it cause harassment, alarm, or distress? Was intended to cause harassment, alarm, and distress? I think, since we're having a legal discussion here, the courts will decide what is intent to insult, whether your behaviour was insulting, and did it cause harassment, alarm, distress? But you know why? Because it already does.
But does it not come down to the individual who's representative of the person defending the case, for example, that isn't it up to him and what he values and what he considers his morals, rather than a generalised consensus?
No, it said with intent. So the court has to show that you, if you were the person doing it, intended to insult. So you see, so it doesn't matter who gets. Okay, it doesn't matter who gets offended by it. It's whether you had the intention to do that. That's already in British law. It's already done. I don't see no problem with implementing that for other things.
I'll pass on to Matthew.
So if it is a legal debate, because I'm with this gentleman here in terms of slight confusion, we would then have to, this cartoonist, this irreverent cartoonist, we would have to then decide whether that individual decided to be insulting or funny then. Is that correct?
Or both.
So again, it's outside of your control, you have to agree, because you won't know what they intended until they have put forth the defence. And then from that, if they decide, this is possibly why comedians get away with so much folly, you have to then decide what the intent of that comedian is or that cartoonist is in order to get an understanding of whether or not they are acting illegally or inappropriately. Is that, if I understood that correctly?
I think common sense, just very briefly, so I keep hogging the mic now. I think common sense will dictate whether something is deliberately insulting or not intended to be a joke. I mean, generally common sense serves us very well for most cases. And in those few cases where it is morally ambiguous or ambiguous as to intent, we take it to the court. That's what the courts do. They already do it. And the court will decide whether intent was showed. And because intent is hard to show, in most cases will be let off. You see, but when intent is clear, then they will be punished by the courts. And as I said, the only reason I'm discussing this, I'm not here to say we must change the law of England. But what I am saying is that if you're asking some advice for, right, if you're asking advice as to how we should approach these matters to prevent human beings from being mistreated, discriminated against, or feel humiliated, then we already have legal principles in place which already do that. And all I'm really calling for is the equalization of a person's religious identity with their racial, quote-unquote, identity. That's really all I'm calling for, right? That's it, thank you.
Can I take the question from the man in the glasses, please?
Thank you. And we're talking about the lines here, and I was just trying to establish where the lines were in three ways. The one way in which I would like to establish it is this intellectual barrier, and we haven't really addressed that. So I'd like to bring the example of Salman Rushdie, who brought a very eloquent, though hypothetical, argument about Islam, and nonetheless was convicted to die in the fatwa issue following that. The second way is the Danish newspaper, which depicted a Muslim wearing a turban, which includes a bomb, or which doubles as a bomb. Why would that pass beyond satire and legitimate criticism for isolated, though they were isolated, violent acts committed by people adhering, or allegedly adhering to Muslim faith, and probably you could say that they are not true Muslims. And the third area is basically just a reiteration of what the gentleman in the corner there said with the hat, is how would you prevent that from preventing religious scholars or religious preachers from making how would you prevent it from preventing them from making arguments against certain groups, such as homosexuals or gays, such as them speaking up against gay rights? How would you stop it from preventing you from doing that? Wouldn't you be afraid, as somebody who is a religious person and probably does not believe in gays, or believes it's a choice or whatever? How would you stop such a thing from infringing upon your desire to express this?
Which panelist would you like to say?
Anyone you choose. I if you would respond. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, first of all, I'll deal with the latter part, which was, for example, with homosexuals, how could they be protected? Now, see, what wouldn't be a fair criticism if somebody got a 5-year-old boy and a man and stripped both naked and printed it out and saying this is what homosexuals want. Why? Because that's not what homosexuals are calling for. They're not asking to do over a 5-year-old boy who's naked. That would be a misrepresentation of homosexual beliefs or values. And therefore, that would be slammed down straight away and wouldn't be permitted. Now, if you look at what we're saying, we're not saying that you can't examine the Quran and say that, okay, we believe that these teachings are, violent and so forth. What we're saying is, when you take the myth, and what the Danish cartoons have done, they've taken a sacred religious figure, Prophet Muhammad, and made him out into being a suicide bomber. What Salman Rushdie has done in his satanic verses, he's taken the wives of the Prophet and said he used the word Bakka, which was the traditional old term for Makkah, and saying this is a place where there were whores and they used to squeal with pleasure. This is clearly insulting, isn't it? It's not an academic critique.
Just to clarify, he made this into a book, this is an intellectual discourse.
No, first of all, he claims it to be a fictional book, so it's not an academic account. And secondly, when you're using the same names and the same setting and the same situation, he's not academically criticizing. He's not saying, academically were the wives of the Prophet prostitutes or not. He's making clear insulting comments. And this is what we're saying, that's the problem. If he had released saying, look, I believe that these women that were married 1400 years ago weren't loyal women, and this is the reason why I don't believe they are, and he academically criticized it, that would be tolerated because that's an academic criticism. Just like I might criticize, I don't believe that homosexuality is a natural thing or whatever. If I argue something to that effect, that's an academic criticism. But when I strip a naked 5-year-old boy and grown man and say this is homosexuality. That is not a true representation of homosexual beliefs or values, and I shouldn't be allowed to do that. And there are laws that should protect people from doing that.
Can I pass this to Jen?
So, with the homosexual thing, it actually, the guy Matt's point earlier, which I didn't really come to, was should preachers be able to say, I hate gays? Well, no. Should they be able to say, I think gay marriage shouldn't be allowed for this reason, this reason, this reason, this reason? That's okay, except quite often it's an underlying hatred of gays, which makes them say that. So, and I think that the current discourse is actually quite borderline as to whether people are being just using it as a disguise for genuine homophobia. So it does need to be kind of looked at more closely, I think, but only in the same way that we should monitor how people in the media are. You know, there is a growing undercurrent of anti-Muslim sentiment. What was your other point?
Would you allow cartoons? What would be my response to cartoons? I think.
So the whole point with satire. Actually, I remember the point. So I was going to say, I think it is plausibly possible. I would pose to the other people on the panel to make an academic insult. The example I would give of this, I can't believe actually doing this, but I'm going to quote Richard Dawkins' book. I don't know the exact quote, but he says something along the lines of, the God of the Old Testament is the most bigoted, vengeful, ruthless, blah, blah, he hates women, he hates homosexuals, blah, 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 blah. And obviously Christians would say, oh, well, the New Testament, blah, 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 whatever. The point is that is him explicitly going on a rant about how that God is an evil creature. And he's doing so using things that he has read, perhaps in a from the wrong background, because he's not got his heart open to God when he was reading the Bible, so he misinterpreted it as being nasty God or whatever. The point is that it is directly insulting, and I think that there will be corner cases like that, but you get corner cases like that everywhere in the law. So it's not necessarily an inherent reason that you shouldn't, that you should ban insults to a particular direct insults, because you can do it in a non-academic setting and it would still be okay. For example, I would say like certain cartoons, like political cartoons, or even someone like a comedian who says something offhand about God, which is an insult, it still might be a valid thing which is insulting, but I think that unless it causes massive outrage, it's probably going to be come under what you would say as not an intent to insult, but an intent to actually discuss it, and it's just had the collateral damage of doing some insulting. So maybe it would be permissible within what the others are suggesting. I wouldn't necessarily agree, but I think you might be wrong if in certain circumstances.
Sorry, I just wanted to talk about what you said about Richard Dawkins. I have heard that, what's that quote? I have heard it. And again, I think it links in with what you said about Leviticus. And I can't stress how much you have to put things in context. And I think a lot of the times why we discuss things like freedom of speech or are they insulting me is because people don't take the time to put things in context. The reason why I'm going to look at everyone here. The reason why I think Muhammad isn't supposed to be depicted is so that it doesn't cause idolatry. Is that right? Idolatry. Yeah. Is that correct? Am I? Yeah. See, with that knowledge, I know why I shouldn't depict him. So it's not a thing of, oh my gosh, they've asked me not to depict him, but depict him anyways. Once you take the time out to figure out why, then it's not a big issue anymore. You have to take things in context. There are non-religious people who are homophobes. There are religious people who are homophobes. The Bible does not endorse homophobia at all, in the slightest. people come under the guise. Did I upset anyone? Oh, okay. Like people have what they have in their heart anyways, and they will pick anything to validate what they feel. And the Bible is not to be used that way. The Bible is the standard. You do not validate how you feel with the Bible. The Bible validates how you should feel. It's not the opposite way.
Can I let Abdullah have one? Then we'll have one last question with the man here.
In answer to the gentleman over there who asked those questions, interesting points. There already exist laws which prevent you from inciting hatred against homosexuals. Already exists. You can't incite hatred against homosexuals. So as I said, all I'm doing is really trying to equalize these things. So having race hatred laws, homophobia related laws. So inciting hatred against communities of believers, Jews, Christians, Muslims, based on their identity, their religious identity, or demeaning them, it should also be suffer the same kind of legal sanction. But I'll put it like this: when you talk about satire, I call this, I just made it up, but the Jewish test, the Jew test. Would you do a cartoon about Jews in the same way, right? Because we know of people who in the past have done cartoons against Jews, and we know how much hatred they had, and we know what they were trying to incite amongst the population, and they were successful at it. They were successful in inciting a hatred against a defenseless, an innocent minority who was just trying to live peacefully amongst the society. But there was so much hatred against them. There was films done against them. Das Weiger Jud was one of those films. Was talking about, oh, look at the Jews, look how they live in our community. They are, they're dirty. Look at they're poor. They want to steal our money. All this stuff. We've been here. We've done that before. That would be banned. That's what I want to see banned. I don't want to see anyone go through what the Jews did. This is when we say never again, we should mean never again. Right? Let's do it again for another ethnic group and see if that goes okay. No, try and nip it in the bud. Lastly, with Dawkins, his statement, it's fair criticism. It's his point. It's his opinion. If you look in Islamic history, we've had, for example, there was this Jewish scholar living in Andalusia, which is Iberia, or Spain, or Portugal, and he was called Ibn Quraysh, and he basically said that the Prophet Muhammad was Mushugana, which as a Hebrew means crazy, right? And he wrote it on a book, published it in an Islamic land, right? And nothing happened to him. He wasn't attacked or killed or forced under some kind of Inquisition, Muslim Inquisition. What happened was that another Muslim scholar, called Ibn Hazm, wrote a refutational book against him. So one guy writes a book, another guy writes a book back refuting him. That's how Islam dealt with intellectual criticism. That's how we welcome that. That's no problem. But as I said, demonization is something different, and it should be sanctioned for the protection and well-being of all members of society, whatever religion they might be.
Okay, I'm really sorry, but we don't have time for any more questions due to speakers having to go back to where they came from. So I'd like to thank you all for coming. I hope you've learned something. I know this debate could go on all night, and I'd like to thank all of the panelists for coming here and telling everyone your opinion on this matter. And I've enjoyed myself. I hope everyone else has enjoyed themselves. I'd like to thank all the volunteers for helping, and everyone else, if you've done anything to help this event come to pass, thank you.